everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. My name is Sam, and I am overjoyed that you would join us today. As usual, I am with my partner, hero, James Anir. How are you today, James?
I am fantastic, Sam. How are you?
I'm getting over a little bit of bronchitis, so if the viewers see the mute button activated, that's because I'm coughing. But I've got some nice, hot Alka-Seltzer cold right next to me. And then I've got some other vitamins here that's really helping me. So we should be good, but I wasn't going to miss a chance to film with you. Today we're talking about 6 essentials to maintain momentum in relational recovery. Now, you might say, you mean you actually can lose motivation or momentum in recovery? And you absolutely can, because that's humanity. And it's tough. You sometimes might think, Sam, you mean you have to remind yourself to stay disciplined? Well, you have to stay disciplined in every area of life. Why would you not have to stay disciplined in recovery, right, James?
Well, yeah, I think we'd all like for it to be easy. And it's like anything else. If you pick up a guitar or you start trying to learn a language, you're going to falter an awful lot. And there's going to be times when it gets so difficult that things slow down and you don't have the momentum going and motivating yourself to push through that can be difficult. This is no different. In fact, I think this might even be a little more difficult or a lot more difficult because of the emotional end of it. It's a long journey. You're building a new relationship with your partner, which is going to be a lifelong journey, that newness of that and learning who you really are and who your partner really is, and vice versa. That can be really difficult to maintain momentum and thus motivation when things slow down, when challenges arise.
Because it would be nice if bills and challenges and kids and sports and all of that would be put on hold as well, but it just doesn't work that way. So I think a lot of what we both do is teaching people how to prioritize, especially the unfaithful, teaching them how to prioritize their recovery work. Would you agree?
I agree. And I think one of the things that people run up against is how do I manage all of life, as you were just referring to, and add in this really big piece, which is really changing. I mean, one could think of it as literally everything, right? Relationally, that big deal of trying to manage everything else really says something about priority. And I can tell you that when I first got into recovery, I changed my whole schedule. I mean, I changed my work schedule. I changed everything to accommodate what I needed to do in terms of, I think everybody knows I did 12-step route. And so I was going to meetings. I was talking to my sponsor every day. Everything that I needed to do had to come first for that. And work, I still had to make money. I still had to pay bills. I still had to do all of that. What I managed to do was flex my schedule around so that I could accommodate those meetings and so on. So it was a priority thing. And yet, A, that's not easy. And B, that takes quite a lot of effort to do that. Now, it's also human nature to avoid discomfort. And recovering relationally from infidelity is uncomfortable. So changing those embedded unhealthy behaviors and patterns is really hard, uncomfortable work. So we need to be able to motivate ourselves in those difficult and uncomfortable times. And so that's what we're going to talk about is how do we maintain that momentum and motivation through those difficult parts of this. In addition to that, I'm going to throw a little study stuff at you, not necessarily science, but there's studies. When we have positive motivation, it's been shown to be a really strong factor in potential outcome. I know that's kind of like saying, I was quoting another government study that said, hey, people who are out of shape generally park closer to the grocery store. Believe it or not, the federal government actually paid for that study to find that out. So,
Hmm.
yeah, positive motivation seems obvious that it's going to be a big factor in a positive outcome, right? And it can be really hard to maintain because some of this difficulty or emotional hard stuff is going to really knock you back and make you wonder how much of this do I have to do? How much can we take? And so on. That's why we have to really work hard to have that positive motivation. And The other part of those studies is that it shows that an intrinsic motivation factor is stronger than the extrinsic. And nice big words for basically if I make that recovery important to me instead of me doing it because it's important to my partner or important to do the right thing and so on, that is going to elevate my ability to maintain that motivation and momentum moving forward and growing in that in my recovery. The results of the studies show that the stronger that motivation, the better the momentum and the more long lasting the results. If you don't do that, if you do it for somebody else, that's going to end up in resentment. And resentment's the surest way to relapse. Lastly, we both help people and we help lay out a process for how this can work individually and relationally. And so there has to be this trust that that process is going to work. And what that means is that sort of unicorn, that part out there that's really hard to have is patience. Being patient with that process. Patience doesn't mean slack off. It means I'm going to work really hard. And sometimes the results are not going to come super fast. They may at the beginning, they may at different parts of it, especially when there's an aha moment and things like that. And a lot of times it's going to be a grind. And so maintaining that motivation during that is really difficult. So if we can believe in the results of the process being leading to a happier, healthier future, it can help us sustain that momentum.
And I think for both the unfaithful, but also the betrayed, it's helpful to lay out some of the challenges with that because it's not, well, it's just hard, or, well, life gets in the way. Those are cliche statements that don't at any level do justice the real challenges that recovery encounters. No matter how committed you are, no matter how much you want to save your relationship or to heal yourself or both, there's going to be challenges that arise. Am I right?
Oh, always rife
I'm
with
always right. Thank you. Thank you. I've been waiting for somebody
absolute.
to validate that. It's been a tough day. So the fact that you just validated I'm always right, I feel really good. So off you go with the challenges. Just kidding, everybody. Just kidding.
It's my pleasure. I'll send you a bill. I think there are a number of challenges that we can identify that might really help people to be able to go, oh, you mean other people have that happen too? Okay. One of them is we get along a ways and we forget why we're there in the first place. And that can especially happen when things are going well. So it's easy to feel a false sense that everything's okay now. And we have to remember that feeling good is great and that we've got to be able to revel in that and revel in some of those accomplishments. And that doesn't mean that, okay, we're done. We have to remember why we're there and that it is a longer term thing. We're in it for the long haul. And that's what's really important to keep that in mind. Another one would be unfulfilled or unrealistic expectations of the recovery process. Things like how fast it's going to go, what it's going to look like.
How
Oh,
long it's going to take.
yeah, exactly. Usually that's going to lead to disappointment because sometimes, again, it's going to go fast and sometimes it's going to go slow. And overall, I remember saying to my friend John Button, who passed away recently, who was a friend and mentor. So I'll use the example of Jungian stuff because that's what we were talking about. And that was how I started to grow as well as my recovery. And I said, "Oh, okay. I see how this is." He handed me sort of a summary type book. I said, "This should take what, about a year?" And he started laughing. And to further that point, even when he passed away, he was still doing work on himself. So
Yeah.
that did finally get through to me that yeah, this is a lifelong
Mhm.
thing. And I love that actually that we can keep working at it because what do we do if we get all cured and better and perfect? We still have to work. Okay. I
Absolutely.
love it. I love it. Sharon and I are working on things that are not problematic. We're working on things that just enhance our lives. And it's fantastic. It's new, it's interesting. We just love doing it together. So I think that those unfulfilled or unrealistic expectations are really important if we put false expectations on it or think that it's going to be absolutely everything's rosy. King Midas came along and touched us with gold. That's really not realistic. So we have to remember that. And what it can end up with is not just disappointment, but resentment. And remember, I just said it, resentment is the number one cause of relapse. So remember, you're going to experience good days, good periods, and bad periods. So keeping that in mind can help you weather those. So in other areas, we're going to end up feeling our feelings because now we don't have any way to self-soothe those. We're not acting out, or we're not doing anything to soothe our feelings and make us feel all better, get those dopamine releases and the serotonin releases and so on. So our emotions are going to be heightened. And guess what? We don't have a particularly good set of coping skills for heightened emotions, or we would probably have used them rather than acting out. Self-soothing can be really thought of as, okay, I'm going to avoid the emotion because it hurts or it's
Right.
difficult and I don't know how to handle it. So when we do feel those feelings, it's going to create some anxiety, or even a lot of anxiety, and that can feel really insurmountable. So we really need to have somebody who can help us learn how to handle that. For an example, we get angry. A lot of us get angry, and that can be hard to control. It can come out at people, at our partner, can come out at anybody, whoever it comes out at, they don't deserve it. That alone can destroy motivation and momentum. And sustained anger will lead to hopelessness. That just shows you how uncontrolled emotions that we're not dealing with. I want to be sure to say this, we're not suppressing them, we're processing and dealing with them. That's what coping means. They can lead to much deeper problems that are going to be harder to overcome and be separative. They're going to disconnect us from our family and partners. I'm going to say this too. If our motivation is dependent on our moods or on somebody else's mood or on circumstances, we are done before we even start. So that motivation has to come from meaning. It has to come from something much deeper, meaning and purpose.
I think there's another variable in this, and that's impatience. Because a lot of times I'll have to help an unfaithful or a betrayed understand you've had this pattern, this survival tactic, or this pattern in your life for multiple decades, and you think reading a great book or having a couple of sessions and talking about it is going to make it just poof disappear, and I'm so much better now, and it doesn't work that way. And as unfaithful, we come to the point where we get so frustrated because we're like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I'm reading books. I'm doing therapy. I'm doing all these things, and he or she will still keep talking about it, and they still keep getting angry and flooding. And we have that wonderful moment where we have to say, so listen, hold on. How long was the affair? How long were you acting out? So you've been at this for a few months. Let's kind of keep this in perspective. This is going to take time. This is going to be a process. You expecting your betrayed to just snap out of it when you have put them through a wood chipper is a little bit unrealistic. So, you unfaithful, one of the best ways to love your partner is by extending patience and compassion to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think also impatience with ourselves. I don't know about you. I got super impatient with myself. Why am I not changing? Why is
Yeah.
this? I'm doing everything I'm being told to do. Why is it taking so long? And I think that again was an unrealistic expectation that it would be, oh, just snip, snap, done. I can just flip a switch and it's all good. Doesn't work that way.
No, it never will.
Yeah.
Here's one that you've talked about before that is not talked about a lot. And I'll say it because not a lot of clinicians have the tact and the boldness to talk about this. But what about romanticizing memories of acting out? That's a tough one.
The romanticizing, actually, this comes from 12 step AA, NA, SLAA. We romanticize the memories of acting out. But what we're doing is we're forgetting all the negatives, all the damage it caused, all the difficulties that it resulted in, and we're just going back to, oh, that felt good. Like, oh, it felt really good to drive that Corvette until I smashed it up and had to go to the hospital. We forget that part. We just remember
Right.
that really fun part. There's a huge danger in that because then we're comparing only the good feeling parts of that to what's happening right now, which is not very good feeling for the most part while we're doing something different and learning a different way. There are some parts where there's good feeling. There's great future as far as feeling great and good a lot in the future. The work has to be put in. So now that work is being compared to all these romantic notions of what the acting out was. We have to stay in reality. We've got to reality check that. Yeah, but it did this. And yes, it wasn't me learning who I am. It was me just running off and regressing and going in a way that isn't helpful or hopeful. That's something that really needs to be watched for. Uh,
Because it takes discipline, it takes commitment to say, my actions have cost me these things. Look at what my acting out has done to my spouse, to my family, maybe your job, maybe your career. And it's not living in shame. That's not living in shame. That's living in reality, right?
yeah, absolutely. And if we're not living in reality, then we're living in fantasy. And not a good kind of fantasy. There's a good kind, but it's called imagination,
Yeah.
and it's to be used positively. The fantasy that I'm talking about is pure fantasy. We're not dealing in reality at all when we're in that mode of mind. And the second thing it does that's perhaps even worse is it keeps the same neural pathways in the brain going, and those are the things we're trying to change. We have to change in order for those actions not to pop right back up.
Because if we don't, we're going to return to the old danger zone behaviors that got us there in the first place, right?
Yep, exactly. If you remember the three circles, the no zone are these are the concrete things I cannot do anymore.
Right.
Danger zone are all those things like people, places, things that I should really avoid or I've got to be cautious about and be aware of that could take me right back into that center circle no zone. So it's very easy to go back to those when we've been romancing things, when we've been feeling like things are difficult. It's easy to go back to that, oh, I'll just do this a little bit. So those old danger zone behaviors still are really important because they're not done until those neural pathways or the new ones are established.
I think that's brilliant information. Now, for you that are unfaithful, we're going to talk about some signs of trouble. But this is also for the betrayed. And we know we have many of you betrayed, male and female, that watch and listen, and we're so grateful that you do. Oftentimes, it takes a betrayed to find information to give to the unfaithful before the unfaithful will take action. Not always, but often. We'll just say that. So, you betrayed. We love that you listen, and we love that you message your partners with our podcast, and we think it's great. But here are some signs of trouble for you, the betrayed, to notice, but mostly for you, unfaithful. If you are experiencing these signs, it is time to wake up. It's time to get expert help. It's time to maybe get back on the horse again. So, James, what's the first sign of trouble?
That'd be lack of self-care. And the easy way to remember this, and I've got to credit one of our listeners because I put it out there. We've got this halt, and then I added shame. So I was like, shout, halts. And then you added bored. And I'm like, where's
Yep.
B going to fit in that? So I put it out there, and one of our listeners and watchers got back to us, and I came up with a couple halibuts,
Hmm.
which was funny. Uh, but I really like this one, halt BS. I dug that because it really says it, right? Those six things are really very clearly a statement of, am I giving myself the self-care that I need? So, halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored, shamed, ashamed, or shameful, right? Okay, we're going to talk about those a little bit later in terms of helpful things that we can do. But if you use that as your sort of template of what is self-care, that makes things a lot easier. It doesn't mean that you're covering everything, but if you're taking care of those six things, you're going to be in far better shape to make this journey.
Well, it's also a good thing to self-reflect. If we're struggling, if we're activated, if we're feeling unsettled, maybe we're feeling tempted even, we can go, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I bored? Am I feeling shame? Ooh, you know what? That could be a way that we kind of rescue ourselves before we do something stupid. Maybe not even something big, but something small, or maybe we're feeling temptation, right? So what's another sign of trouble?
Overconfidence. I got this. I got this. I don't need to
Yeah.
worry.
Yep.
Well, that takes the eye off the ball. And so if we get to that place where we're believing that we've kind of mastered this recovery piece, the door is now wide open to becoming ambivalent and to relapse into old behaviors. Wide open. We can step through it so easily if we think we've got it. We've got this thing down. Another part of that is we can put ourselves into difficult situations, kind of like testing ourselves
Yeah.
or, beating our chest saying, see, I can handle it. Like somebody who's a freshly minted recovering alcoholic and they say, I'm going to go into a bar. not, not a very wise thing to do. We can do that once we've said, oh, I got this. We can put ourselves into very dangerous situations. So overconfidence is a big sign of trouble.
Yeah, my great friend Rick Reynolds always said that relapse is always about pride, thinking that we've got it figured out, thinking that we can do this on our own, thinking that we've got our legs, we're good to go. I'm better than that. And it always ends up being to our ruin. What about complacency?
You got to know what's got you this far in the first place. And you got to keep doing that. If you are not continuing to do what got you to this healthier place where maybe now you do get complacent, then that's going to lead to trouble. So keep doing that, keep getting advice as to what the next steps are, and keep pushing towards it. One helpful thing here, and this is something that does need to go away later on in recovery, because otherwise it just keeps you in a bad spot or could keep you in a bad spot. And that's staying scared or having a healthy amount of fear about potentially regressing or relapsing, because the potential for that is real, especially in those earlier stages. So that's another way to not get overconfident and to not get complacent.
Excellent. Now, we talked about this earlier, and I have this in my notes. So, the lack of discipline, right? I mean, that just never goes away. That's always going to be a concern.
Here's the deal. If you know the things that you really have to do and you make those part of a routine, you're going to be in far better shape because then you're not going to forget them. Keep it simple, but don't just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Self-control and discipline are vital. That consistent routine of healthy activities supports your lasting recovery. Healthy activities, I think everybody, if they've listened to any of these, they're going to know you're going to therapy, to your coaching. You've got supports that you check in with all the time. If you're in 12 step, which I highly advise, whether you think you have an addiction or not, uh, have a sponsor who's going to help guide you and supports in there. Those things are super important to give you that consistency and that discipline because then you have people that they call it bearing witness. You're
Yeah,
you're telling them this is what I'm going to do, and then you kind of have that need to fulfill that so that you're fulfilling what you've said you're going to do. If you abandon those things and kind of strike out on your own, we don't recover alone. We
yeah.
just don't. And so abandoning all those healthy things is going to lead, well, I say it's going to lead to relapse. If I were being a little more friendly, it would be it can lead to relapse. But I like to say it's going to. I haven't seen a time yet where it doesn't.
It's great sense.
A lot of the things can come up. We talked about those feelings that are just raw and you don't know what to do with them. They can be in and of themselves anxiety and depression, but they can certainly lead to that frustration, et cetera, can lead to that anxiety and depression. If that is left untreated, it's going to spiral and get worse, and then it's going to become untenable. And what are you going to do if you haven't gotten new neural pathways established? You're going to want to self-soothe, and it's going to become less and less likely that you're going to stay in recovery.
Right. Makes great sense. Now, it's frequent that we unfaithful fall into self-pity as well, right?
Oh, yeah, man, we can make it a full-time job. One of the ways that we can stop that, it seems kind of oxymoronic in a way, and that is if we acknowledge that at one time in our lives, whenever that was, that we were the victim of abuse or neglect or our needs weren't met, then that actually allows us to move forward because then we
Hmm.
don't get trapped in that. Yes, we have to process it, we have to work on it, and that's where helpers come in. And if we don't do that, we're going to constantly be a victim of that past. So we have to at least acknowledge that so we can move forward. And second, with any kind of victim mentality, really, we're going to lose hope, and that's going to lead to relapse.
Yeah. What about dishonesty? Because as long as we're dishonest with ourselves and with other people, that's a big sign of trouble, right?
Huge. Like let's flip that on its head and say that honesty is a significant sign of recovery.
Yeah.
And it can take time to get to the place where that's our automatic, that's our default is honesty because we've lied for so long and done it so often, we often don't even know when we're doing it. Once we
Right.
can actually get a hold of that and we're coming from our authentic selves, we're going to be honest. And that really means that, wow, when we're noticing that or other people are really noticing that, that's a significant sign of recovery. Big. If we catch ourselves lying, we're on relapse road. We're not on recovery road. So that can actually help us. If we catch ourselves lying, we can make the amends, we can own it right away, and then we can say, whoa, okay, what do I need to do right now? Because I don't want to be on this relapse road. I want to be on that going that way on recovery road. The other part of it is lying to ourselves. So it's not just lying to others, lying to ourselves, especially about our need for recovery work. Oh, I don't really need that so much anymore. I can do that once a week instead of 3 times a week or 7 times a week. Or I don't really need to see the therapist or the coach as often. That's costing a lot of money or whatever, and so on. When we lie to ourselves about our need for that recovery work, that is very telling that we are on relapse road.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's another little nuance on top of that that I know for me, when I feel like I need to be right, I know that I am probably hungry and tired. If I feel like I need to be right, I know something's awry. But that's not just a SAM metric. That's a concern in our recovery after all that we've put our partners through, right?
Oh, yeah, because if we need to be right, it means somebody else is wrong. And that's typically,
Yeah.
when we're feeling indignant or that we're being put upon or that there's some sort of injustice here, that's when we need to go, okay, whoa, that's a significant sign that we need to press pause and figure out what's going on because it's bad. Frustration's another thing too. It precedes the need to be right. And frustration can often be because we're not having that linear progression that we're hoping for, that we're getting bumps and dips. And in reality, this is how we grow. We don't grow like this. But if we're expecting this, then and we're not getting it, then that can lead to frustration. It can lead to ultimately discontent and negativity. Now, I'm going to say this. I was a pessimist for a long, long time. And so that discontent and negativity went along with that. It wasn't so much
Yeah.
resulting from a lack of progression or that existed beforehand. And that was something that I had difficulty dealing with. And so I wanted to self-soothe. If I'm contented and I'm pretty positive, I'm not saying like a Pollyanna, but if I'm pretty positive and I have some contentment and some peace, then I'm on that recovery road really well. If that discontent and negativity creeps into my life now, I know that's a sign that I'm vulnerable, at least to an emotional relapse, if not a full-on relapse.
Yeah, makes great sense. And then our final concern is when we lose focus or we become focused on everybody else instead of ourselves, right?
Yeah. That's deflection, distraction, and so on. When we focus on somebody else's growth or recovery, especially our partners, like, wow, why isn't she or he growing at the same rate I am, or getting critical of them, right? That is totally pulling our focus away from what we need to be doing. And it's a very short distance to going into that relapse spiral.
It's great. Now, as we end today, we're going to give you 6 ways to stay motivated. 6 ways that you, as an unfaithful, can have your own kind of little checklist here to print out or put on your phone or put somewhere to read on a regular basis. So, what's the first way? And this is my favorite way to stay motivated in recovery work, James.
It's got to be your number one priority. You've got to keep your eye on the prize. Always keep your eye on the prize. My favorite quote here: energy flows where priority goes.
I use it all the time, and my clients love it.
That self-care, the halt BS, you need to apply that individually and relationally. So I want to give you a couple ideas within that. Hungry, adequate, healthy nutrition. It's not just about, oh, I'm hungry, so I'll have a chocolate bar. Okay, healthy food, but also timely, because I don't know about you, but if I don't eat, my moods are going to spiral and they're going to get the better of me.
You're preaching to the choir here, brother. Let me tell you, hungry, not a good scenario for me.
So angry, speaking of being hungry and devolving into mood, you have to learn how to manage that anger. You have to be able to address it and let that energy out in another way. People sort of poo-poo the, oh, yeah, sure, just go get some exercise. Well, it sure as heck helps with feeling frustrated or angry. So not a bad way. And there are other ways to handle anger as well. The lonely part, spend time with other people. If you and your partner are getting along well, spend time with your partner. Tired, adequate rest and relaxation. Notice I added relaxation there. It's not just, okay, how much sleep am I getting? Because this is emotionally hard work.
Yeah,
And emotional work drains you just as much as physical work. So you've got to get the proper rest and relaxation, because if you don't, you're going to be less able to handle this work. Engage in things that hold your interest. Do things that create a little lift in you, some passion, some creativity, things that you really enjoy, whatever that looks like. You've got to engage in those, or you're going to be bored, and boredom is not a good thing when it comes to staying in recovery. I think for the last one, shame, just working on identifying and working through shame and guilt. And obviously, having help with that is really important.
great. What's number 2?
Number two is celebrating your milestones. Partners may go, say, what? Right? You're not, look, the relational stuff, the milestones that you and your partner reach, celebrate with your partner. When it's basic recovery stuff, you're not going to celebrate that with your partner, because that's like asking for a gold star. It's not their job to do that. So you have to celebrate that with yourself, acknowledge it, right? And with your supports and your therapist and coach. Because if you can acknowledge those milestones in a positive way, they're going to help motivate and keep momentum, which is what we're talking about here. Recognize the progress that you're making in overcoming your guilt and shame. Focus on your successes. All of those are going to help motivate you and keep you moving forward, because now you're going to be like, okay, that's worth it. That is what we call a healthy dopamine release.
Right, right. Which brings us to number 3. What's the third way we can stay motivated?
That support network, that community we always talk about, build it and use it, because loneliness and isolation equal relapse. Look, I'm an introvert. I don't want to be surrounded by 40, 50 people and go rah, rah. You plop me in the middle of a mall and I'm going to freak out, man. If it's like Christmas, I'm wanting to get out of there. I don't do well with that stuff. And I would not be sitting here talking to you if I had basically six supports, my sponsor included in that. That was
Yeah.
sufficient for me being an introvert. For extroverts, it might be more, and they may not have an issue with this problem. It's those of us who just want to stay away from other people. And that could be out of shame, might not be introversion. We need to overcome that because that's where the recovery lies.
Number
Next
four.
one, baby steps, Bob, baby steps. If you remember the movie, you
What
know,
about Bob? Absolutely.
a great movie. Break down recovery into small, accomplishable daily steps. This is why the AA people say one day at a time. Really, that could be said 1 minute at a time. Break it down into things that you can actually accomplish because as a whole, it looks too big. How am I going to do that? But if we break
Yeah.
it down, it's like anything in life, we can get overwhelmed if we take the whole of, wow, if you could see what I have to do this month, man, it would flatten me. Okay, so I'm going, all right, one thing at a time. Let's prioritize those and we're going to put them into accomplishable acts. That way, the big picture will take care of itself.
Number five, you need a structure, right, to be able to even attack the big picture.
As much as maybe some of acting out was uh, habit, even compulsion, even addiction, it's habit that is going to help us get out of this. Good habits, obviously, and those come from creating good structure. So if we have good structure, then we're repetitively doing the things that within that structure that creates habit. When we were acting out, which wasn't structured at all, that created chaos in our lives, which was felt by everybody.
Yeah.
And so that creating structure gives us that sense of order and everything has its place and it helps us with sequence. It's like having a neat desk. If you know where everything is, then you can be more efficient and it won't feel so overwhelming. Best way to modify an unhealthy behavior is to replace it with a better one, with a healthy one.
Right. I tell unfaithfuls, look, the only way out of this is developing new habits, patterns, and routines. If you're not willing to develop new habits, patterns, and routines, your recovery work is going to be sluggish at best. And finally, number six, and I love this one because you are such a great expert on this, but what's number six?
Building a healthy self-concept. People might look at their self-concept and go, well, what was wrong with that? So self-concept is basically how we think of ourselves. Well, I'm a good guy. I'm this, I'm that. I'm successful. I'm blah, 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 whatever concept we have. Yet there has to have been something that wasn't right with it, or we wouldn't have done the things that we've done. So my belief is that
Absolutely.
our healthy self-concept has to match with our values. In order to be authentic, that has to match, right? We have to be able to come from ultimately who we are, which, yes, that's a long journey to figure out who we are, but that's part of this journey. And so, at least to say, okay, these are the values, these are the things that really are important to me, and how do I live out of those? And if I'm living out of those, then my self-concept matches who I am or who I'm trying to be in my better self. What that's going to do is we're going to have hope. We're going to have a
Yeah.
positive outlook just through our actions, affirming our actual positive qualities, even if we believe we don't have them. If we're starting to rework this self concept, because some people have a shame based self concept. Well, I'm just a piece of garbage. Well, that has to change, or we're not going to have hope. We're not going to have change over time into something that could be, frankly, glorious. So we've got to be able to affirm those positive qualities. The more we act out of those values, the more those get affirmed. The last piece on that is we need to learn from mistakes, but we can't get buried in the past and thinking about them constantly because that gets circular, and circular is always going to turn into a spiral. So we need to make that linear, say, okay, there's the mistake. Here's the result of the consequences. How can I do this thing differently?
And I think building or actually rebuilding or building our self-concept is one of the most important variables to prevent relapse. Because if we have a healthy self-concept, we're going to be less likely to act out, less likely to try and escape, less likely to try and medicate. And so, for those of you that are struggling with any of these and you want help, by all means, find help. There's tons of great clinicians, there's tons of great coaches that are out there. If James or I can help, or if you're interested in working with myself or James, or if you're even looking at an intensive, just reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. We are always thrilled to hear your questions. We'd love for you to subscribe and leave a comment. And we try and answer all of our comments ourselves. We try and answer all our email. We just aren't able to do therapy or coaching over email. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. We value each and every one of you. We love doing this. This, as you can tell from both of us, is a passion of ours. So thank you. And we think of you every time we film. We're honored that you would spend your time with us. We'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.